Flames of retaliation engulf the region as Iran's 17th missile wave strikes Zionist targets, a roaring response to the Zionist entity, while European nations scramble to salvage a diplomacy already drowned in missile smoke. With cyber wars raging and global voices like Algeria condemning Israeli aggression, this conflict redraws the Middle East battle lines. Hello there and welcome to our tonight's show. Iran's Revolutionary Guards fired a fresh wave of missiles at Israeli military and industrial targets, including Haifa, Be'er-Sabah, and Jaffa, in retaliation for Israeli aggression. Zionist media reported sirens blaring across occupied territories, with explosions rocking Al-Quds and Jaffa. At least 50 settlers were wounded, according to Zionist authorities, while Iranian state media claims strikes destroyed a Zionist intelligence hub in Be'er-Sabah. The attacks mark the 17th wave of Iran's True Promise 3 operation, using long-range missiles and drones to hit Zionist command centers and weapons facilities. The so-called compensation fund in the Zionist entity reported on Friday that it has received more than 30,735 claims since the beginning of the war with Iran, including damage to homes, vehicles, and equipment as a result of Iranian missile attacks. The fund also confirmed that 3,000 people were evacuated from their homes on Thursday, noting that the total number of those evacuated since the beginning of the war with Iran has reached 8,190 people. These figures come as the Zionist entity continues to cover up its losses resulting from the Iranian strikes. Let's now bring in our three panelists to help us break down this pressuring issue. Joining us live from California is Dr. Hamoud Salhi, Associate Dean and Professor of Political Science at California State University. Thank you for joining us tonight, sir.
You're welcome, Islam. It's always a pleasure being here.
From New York, Mr. Mohammed Krissasi, a geopolitical and financial analyst. Happy to have you with us, sir.
Have a good evening, everyone. Always a pleasure being with you.
And from Michigan, the United States, joining us tonight is Mr. Adam Shapiro, Director of Advocacy, Israel, Palestine at Dawn. Thank you for accepting our invite, sir.
Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, let's kickstart the discussion. Let me start with you, Mr. Adam Shapiro. Iran's missile strikes increasingly penetrate Zionist air defenses. What consequences will this military failure have for Netanyahu's government?
Well, Netanyahu is basically waging a big bet on his political survivability on continuing the war with Iran by perpetuating the war, the attacks on Gaza, and on other neighboring countries since October 7th, 2023. And effectively, he's trying to stave off facing legal battles and other political challenges by keeping his people and his nation at war continuously. And so the longer the war goes on, the longer Netanyahu actually can hold on to power, despite what is clearly losses that the Zionists are suffering, the ongoing bombardment and damage that's happening to homes, to businesses, to military installations, to the economy. People are fleeing. But Netanyahu has capitalized on this and seems to be able to continue to hold on to power despite dragging his country and his people down, and the entire region down.
Mr. Hamoud Salhi, Zionist authorities admit that there are over 30,000 compensation claims from settlers. How does this expose the false narrative of Israel's supposed military advantage?
Well, in a sense, it is connected to a degree that the Israelis want to project the idea that they are superior, which is true. They have a superior military capabilities even though they are losing on many levels. And that comes at a cost. When this thing started, Netanyahu came and made a point, telling the Israelis that this is going to be a long battle, and there is going to be some losses, some painful things. And he's true to that. And when you listen to the Israeli televisions or interviews that Western media have had, there is a little blame, if none, of the Netanyahu's government. As Mr. Shapiro noted, Netanyahu is getting sort of advantage of this and use it to his advantage. The other point that we need sort of to be also careful, I feel like there is more to this story. And for years, Israel built its reputation, its connection, or its ask for military support from the United States on the idea that they are vulnerable. So every time a new weapon comes in the market, it's asked for more. So when we are seeing all these pictures of what some call Iranian success, or a result of Iran's response to Israeli aggression, Netanyahu's government doesn't mind showing it, because it is to project the idea they are weak and they need help. And what a better help to get at this point. The perception that Israel is surrounded by enemies is sort of find an example. What we've seen on the street, we've seen people fleeing, we've seen all of this going out, and the cost of the economy, which comes in billions at this point. All of this add gives justification for Netanyahu to ask more from the United States. And let's not forget, we are at a critical stage where Netanyahu desperately needs the United States to come to his rescue. And what a better way to showcase these casualties on the screen, as if to tell the United States, without you, we need you, and without you, are not going to make it through this huge devastation.
Mr. Mohammed Sassi, we talked yesterday about settlers fleeing the occupied Palestinian territories to Europe through sea. I mean, wartime pressures exacerbate long-standing inequalities between, for instance, Ashkenazi elites, Mizrahi Jews, and Russian immigrants, all responding differently to the crisis. Does this crisis reveal that Israel's claim of Jewish unity was always an illusion, masking systematic discrimination?
Well, the discrimination always existed within Israel between the Sephardic of Mizrahis, the Jew coming from the Arab land or the Muslim land, and Ashkenazi who are the elite. And since the beginning, it was like the two Jewish community, and they were big discrimination with the two of them. I will compare the Sephardic as the untouchable of India. And now we begin to feel it. Yes, they come to have a power political post and also participating in more equality, trying at least. But it's still, the divide still there. And matter of fact, you have more Jewish now, even on the Ashkenazi side, leaving the country than the Jewish coming within the country. This is due, number one, to the insecurity that Israel, since its creation, basically was always in war, and the people leaving Russia or leaving Iran or leaving the Maghreb to go to install in the colony, now they find out that they cannot sustain what's going on. They cannot sustain what's going on. I think for one Jewish coming, three of them were leaving. Matter of fact, the Israeli government put an halt on it, and they don't allow right now the Jewish to leave the country from the colony, as well as the Jewish community in general. That is one thing. And the other thing is you have also economically, it's a divide. When your sons and daughter are going to protect the frontier and the economical machine cannot work since you don't have the manpower, they are fighting. Lebanon, South Lebanon, Gaza, Gaza, we can talk about that in more details. But all of this is a big divide. And before it was the flag, the Israeli flag, everybody goes around. But now they feel that they cannot sustain what's going on, number one, and also that Netanyahu is the warmonger. And why he's doing this? Not to protect the Israeli citizenship, is to protect himself. He knows that the day he will get out of the government, he will end up in jail. And that you have to be aware of that geopolitical landscape due to this guy. And America cannot neither sustain more and more. In America, you see this image of these poor Palestinians in Gaza. They are kids and women. Every day, 60 or 70 of them are killed, not because they are terrorists, just because they are going to get some bread and some flour, and they get killed. How can we not feel that the Netanyahu is, number one, is not accepted? I should not say it's not the right line. Is no more this untouchable, this Jules Caesar of Israel. No. Now they understand that he is the source of their problem. They don't say it openly, but it's beginning to be a divide. Don't forget that before the war with Iran, every single day it was a manifestation asking for the return of the kidnapping people due to October 7, but also to blame him for not doing what he's supposed to do. Number one, the security, this is why October 7 happened, but also now that is getting them on an avenue that they cannot sustain. Iran can sustain a long war. We know that. I'm not going to repeat myself, but between 1980 and 1988, everybody was against them in the Middle East, and they was financed with the Saudi Arabia and the other GCC country. It's not the case of Israel. Now, Trump, why is he asking for 2 weeks delay? Because listening to Netanyahu telling him that, everybody in Israel is with me, they are around the flag. No, it's not. And Trump found out that it was a waking up call when he come back to the set and they told me, what are you doing? The specter of 2003 is coming back. And then America cannot accept it. They don't want to go to have this body bag coming from the Middle East. They have nothing to do with it. Like I said yesterday, again today I was crossing at the UN because I go to the UN every day. It was in front of the mission of America, Jewish people manifesting, saying Israel should not go to war with Iran and America should not pay for it. And this, again, the divide, to answer your question, is there, not only between the Sephardic and the Mizrahi, but now the Jewish at large and the community at large. And as Dr. Sarhi said, Netanyahu is like a prince without claws. Everybody knows that he failed. And what he was saying, Mr. Shapiro was saying that he's going to remain in power as long as, I don't think he will remain in power even as long as he is doing maintaining this work, because the people now understand that America is questioning him. The world is questioning them. How can you, son of the Auschwitz victim from the 1945, the Second World War II, in France, the pogrom of Poland and Hungary, now they come back and their son and daughter are doing the same thing in Gaza. It's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. And now the world is watching. So therefore, Netanyahu cannot hide now. He's without, a tree cannot hide the forest. It's not only a question of Israel's survival, it's also a question of the Jewish survival. They are not all Zionists.
We'll talk about that point later, Mr. Mohammed Sassi. Mr. Shapiro, as settlers flee in panic aboard boats to Cyprus, while Palestinians remain unshaken on their land and continue their 75-year resistance, what does this exodus of settlers reveal about the difference between colonizers and a rooted people?
Well, we have seen, not just since October 7th, but even before that, during the year-long protests that were going on in the streets of Tel Aviv and other cities against the Netanyahu government, that Jewish Israelis were seeking ways out to Europe, to the United States, to Australia, to Canada, to other countries for either economic reasons or for dissident reasons, or now fleeing the war. And of course, they have opportunity. They have the ability to access EU countries without visa restrictions. They have often a greater amount of wealth and disposable wealth to be able to go and move. And of course, some of them may think or may be choosing to do this for temporary reasons, or think that they're going for temporary reasons. Of course, that's yet to be determined. I would just like to note that we shouldn't, while Palestinians by and large do remain steadfast and resilient on their land, there have been about 100,000 Palestinians from Gaza who have unfortunately had to leave because everything is destroyed, because they need medical attention and other reasons. And we shouldn't overlook the fact that this Zionist effort in Gaza not only has led to at least 55,000 people killed and over 200,000 injured at least, but also the displacement of some of the population, despite people's desires to stay. That said, Palestinians aren't going anywhere. And it is clear that at the first opportunity, Zionists, Jews will leave, while that, is certainly, from a longer term perspective, could be an opening for how Palestinians could ultimately return to their homes and to change the demographic balance. We're still talking about relatively small numbers. I think what's in some ways more interesting is that Europe, which has been turning away people fleeing war and conflict from Africa and the Middle East, and turning away ships and causing thousands of people to die at sea in the Mediterranean, have opened their ports and welcomed these ships of Zionists. And there's an inherent discrimination and racism involved in that I think has largely not been discussed in any kind of media forums. And I think that's an interesting piece of this that Europe should need to reckon with.
Mr. Salhi, the same question. Does this crisis expose that Zionist security was always dependent on Palestinian subjugation?
Well, subjugation is not a way of describing it. It's more colonization. But the Zionist project is bigger. What we should notice is that Israel, in order for it to survive, it needs war. The war that we've seen so far is the exception in terms of its length. Israel tend to believe that they enter the wars for a shorter period of time because of the impact it has on their economies and because of other factors. What changed, and I think we mentioned this before, is the demographic in Israel have changed since the collapse of the former Soviet Union in late 80s. Up to that point, you had a generation of Israeli leaders, including Ben Gurion, including Ishaq Rabin, even Begin and Golda Meir, who believed that the security of Israel depends on its normalization of relations with the Arab. That if the Arabs get to accept Israel as a neighbor, as an equal partner, the Jews will live in peace in the Middle East. And that was the biggest message. Whether the Israelis meant it or not, what we know historically is that when Anwar Sadat, late president of Egypt, decides to surprise the Israelis and say, I'm coming to the Knesset and give a speech about peace. The Israelis were surprised, were shocked that for the Egyptian leader to make that overture. They thought they can keep talking about wanting normalization, but the Arabs will not take it, so we'll just continue talking about it. And that began a new era, I believe, in the idea of accepting certain kind of dialogue between the Palestinians and the Israelis, between the Arabs and the Israelis, led by Egypt. What changed, however, and then continued with the Oslo, which initially was built around the idea of peace, a land for peace. And it was meant that by May 1997, the Israel and Palestine will live together in a state, that the Palestinian state will be by that time in the West Bank and Gaza achieved. And that all issues about refugees, all of that will be resolved. Netanyahu come to power in 1996, and I'll be very brief. He changed that formula, peace for land, to security for peace. And that's where we see today the whole idea of security is the most important thing. It so happened that the group that showed up, about 1 million of Jews from the Soviet Union in late 1980s, we changed the democratic. Shapiro talks about the incentive, the right of return. Israelis are given salaries, monies to come back and live. The Haredis, for example, they are paid to just contemplate and believe and propagate the Jewish faith. All of this were there as incentive to believe that they have their homeland. And the best way to perceive it is to surround yourself with a dome that the United States built, with a wall that separates the Palestinian territories in Gaza and the West Bank and Gaza. All of this designed to protect Israel with security. But that, as we've seen, particularly with what's happened on October 7 and with this war, that is sort of gone. So yes, Islam, there is part of it is the idea of subjugation, but it's bigger than that. They are not looking for subjugation. They are actually looking to exterminate the Palestinians from Earth. What they're doing in Gaza is horrific. And it's the idea is to either expel them or kill them by hunger.
Mr. Sassi, will this visible collapse of settler moral, force Western backers to reconsider their unconditional support for the Zionist project?
Well, I would like to go back a little bit in history to explain, with all humility, following what my two distinguished panelists are saying. The nature of Zionism, if you take, Zionism is not dead, of course, but it's fractured into different interpretations. Number one, you have the classical Zionism, the one was named from the notion of Herzl and Ben-Gurion, who emphasizes on building the Jewish homeland, promoting Hebrew culture and gathering exile, secular, socialist, and modernist in orientation. But today the vision is fading as Israel's society becomes more religious, more fragmented, and less focused on existential survival. So you have what I call the post-Zionism, which is a critique of the Zionism exclusively or nationalism. And then often associated with the left-wing academic and activities. And then again, now the question is whether Israel should be a Jewish state for all, or a Jewish for all his citizens. And this is the question that you are asking me today. When you look at Haifa, is more, I think, 2 million Muslim Israeli living there, Muslim and some Druze as well, living there. But do they have the same right than the Jewish settler who come yesterday? And as Dr. Salih is saying, with all this incentive that you are giving them to stay there, because as I said before in the opening of my presentation, more Jewish are going out than coming in. And then that's one of the issues. And the other issue, unfortunately, we have to talk about is the religious Zionism that see the modern state as part of a divine redemption process. How can you find a divine message? You don't have to ask the question, why I'm here. You cannot ask, no, this is my right, I have to be here. That land is mine. And you have more and more influential politic, specifically in the settler movement. Netanyahu, without the settler movement, he cannot be first minister. They are the Zionists, they are the extremists. And unfortunately, now they become increasingly dominant in the military and even the judiciary. This is why a few months ago, to stay in power when the war was taking place, Netanyahu was obliged to associate himself with the extreme right to be elected. And then, for me, is a strong belief that they want to take the control over the West Bank, what they call also Judea and Samaria, and what's going on in Gaza. How can you accept what's going on in Gaza? Mr. Shapiro was naming 60,000 people dead. Yes, indeed. This is a genocide, without counting the 100 or 150 body in the ruins that we didn't yet discover. How we are going to talk about, about the Zionism reality? It's no Zionism reality. Now it's extremely religious state, becoming an extremely religious state, and extremist because they claim that is a divine right to be there. And it's not more the people. We have Jews that are secular Jews. We have Jews that they come to Israel because they feel persecuted after World War II. The Jews, they come just because, like the settlers coming from America, most of them because they were afraid for their children with the drugs, and they want to save them in the colony. But now we find out that the extremism is taking place. And they forget, and this is why I'm saying, and I will conclude on that, the notion of Zionism. And then you have the Lord Balfour in 1917. The Foyer National Juif is not the Foyer National Zionist. It was the Foyer National Juif. And then you have 1945. And the culpability of Europe and the hypocrisy of Europe. They created the program of Poland. They created the program of Hungary. They created the Valdiv and the Drancy in France. They created Auschwitz. And then you want to support Israel at any cost because of your guilt. Why? Why is that? I don't understand it. I am a peace, and I'm a citizen, a peacemaker. I'm a citizen of the world. I don't have any problem with any religion. But when they come now, you are disfiguring this noble religion, monotheist, that is Abrahamic religion. Why? Until when are you going to accept that? If you look at, for example, in America, it was a movie we're talking about, the civil rights movement. And what we don't, when you have a tendency to forget, you have the LaRouche movement that were killing the Jew as well as the black. If you see at the movie, talking about, the movie name is Mississippi Burning. Look what they did to these black kids, but it was also Jew. And only because the parents of the Jewish kids said, but it's not right what you are doing, that emerged the civil rights movement and emerged justice that have to be done. But I think, again, what I'm going, maybe is going to shock certain of you, APAC was created not to finance the political system. In the beginning, it was to protect the Jew. If you take in 1945, or in the World War II, the movement, the German movement in, I don't remember the name, in the America, they didn't condemn the Kristallnacht or 1936. They didn't condemn the coming of the Hitler chancellery coming in 1936. They let the Jew be gassed and killed and all this torture that they were submitting until 1943. Why you forget about that? Why now the Palestinians have to pay the price of the blood that was shed by this white supremacist Christian in Europe for centuries and centuries? And I will conclude on that.
Thank you, Mr. Mohammed Krissassi. All right, gentlemen, let's take a closer look at the diplomatic front right now. As missiles fly and threats escalate, a rare window for diplomacy opens in Geneva. On Friday, European powers, France, Germany, and the UK sat down with Iran's top negotiator in a high-stakes bid to defuse the nuclear talks crisis. With Washington holding its fire and the region on edge, the E3 is racing against time to prevent a wider war. Hussein Burkan has more.
Today in Geneva, diplomacy cautiously returned as Iran and the European Troika, France, Germany, and the United Kingdom met for the first time since war erupted between Iran and Israel. With the US delaying any military response, Europe is stepping into the void, hoping to revive nuclear talks before the conflict spirals out of control. Led by Iran's top diplomat Abbas Araghchi, the discussions focus on Tehran's nuclear program, uranium enrichment, and missile capabilities. European envoys say Iran appeared open to renewed international inspections and even hinted at discussing missile limits, though no deal was struck. The Troika has played a central role in Iran diplomacy since the early 20s, leading to the 2015 JCPOA nuclear deal, but that framework collapsed after the US withdrawal in 2018, and recent efforts in Muscat and Rome failed amid renewed Israeli strikes. Today's talks are seen as a last-ditch attempt to rebuild trust and avoid a regional nuclear crisis.
Le retour à la négociation.
French President Emmanuel Macron is pressing for tougher limits, closer to US demands, but Iran rejects any deal made under pressure and refuses to halt enrichment. European diplomats believe only a phased approach with full IAEA access and an enrichment freeze could work. Yet, with ongoing airstrikes, regional proxy attacks, and rising political pressure on all sides, the diplomatic path is narrowing fast. Still, the fact that Iran showed up in Geneva proves diplomacy isn't dead. But with Israeli leaders warning of wider strikes and US forces now positioned across the region, any breakthrough must come quickly before war buries the chance for peace.
Algeria has denounced the Israeli strikes on Iran as provocative and unjustified, calling them a blatant violation of the United Nations Charter. Speaking at the emergency UN Security Council session requested by Tehran, Algeria's permanent representative Ammar Benjama said the attacks targeted nuclear facilities under the safeguards of the International Atomic Energy Agency and warned that such actions threaten the credibility of the Global Non-Proliferation Treaty.
Israel's attack against Iran is an unprovoked and unjustified act. It constitutes a flagrant violation of the Charter of the United Nations. This is an attack on nuclear facilities under IAEA safeguard. If these safeguards, if these guarantees, and even the presence on the ground of international inspectors cannot guarantee the protection of such installations, then the credibility of the entire nuclear non-proliferation regime is called into question.
All right, let's go back to discussion. Mr. Shapiro, Iran refused to negotiate with the United States until Israeli aggression stops. And today Europe has taken the lead. Can the E3 succeed where US-backed diplomacy stalled? Can the E3 secure interim agreements fast enough to prevent escalation before any military options take over?
I think this is definitely an important question, and we'll have to see how far Europe is willing to go. Europe has a lot of economic leverage to use and has obviously a longer tradition of negotiation with Iran. However, I think a more salient question, and one that's being ignored at this point, is that even if a deal is reached, and even if Iran accedes to certain conditions that at the moment it may be saying that it won't, the real question is whether or not Israel will abide by any agreement. And I raise this because an agreement between Iran and Europe, or Iran and the United States, is only good insofar as Israel stops its aggression. And what we have seen over the last 20 plus months in the context of Gaza is that multiple agreements have been reached with Hamas over ceasefire and over terms on how to end the war and the conflict there, leading to potentially a permanent resolution, only to see that the United States can't bring Israel to the table and can't hold Israel to any agreements that it makes. And so the real weakness in this entire scenario is not necessarily whether or not Europe can reach a deal with Iran, but rather whenever a deal, whatever a deal materializes, will that deal be able to be effectively enforced, in a sense, on Israel and get Israel to stop its aggression? And I would have to say the track record until now is not very good. Not only with Israel consistently violating terms of ceasefires that it participates in itself, but also over the years, going back, as certainly further than 1993. But even if we take the Oslo Accords as a starting point on this, from the very beginning, Israeli governments, and many of them were led by Prime Minister Netanyahu, have reneged or simply violated the terms of any deals that are made that are brokered by the international community. And I think that is something that has to be reckoned with if we're going to try to resolve the situation now.
Thank you, Mr. Shapiro. Mr. Hamoud Salhi, analysts see that Trump's 2-week timeline could reflect past delays, like his overlooked ultimatum to Russia on Ukraine. Is this deadline a genuine strategic pause or a political maneuver? I mean, what signals should we observe at this point?
Let me get back to that in a second, because what's happening in this meeting is very, very important, and I'll connect it to the Trump point. So this meeting in Europe for 3 hours in Geneva had a mixed analysis or mixed reviews. On the one hand, we see, for example, that the 3 items were discussed. One is the zero uranium enrichment that we all know. Iran, you must stop whatever it is you're doing to enrich your uranium. That's the agenda that always was there, and it dominates. The second issue that is surprising is they are asking the Iranian to stop their ballistic missile program. Remember, in 2015, Iran was given the right to defend itself by pursuing these weapons of the missile or ballistic missile. That's how the deal worked out, because the Iranian felt that they have a way of protecting themselves. Europe now, this meeting is bringing it back as a condition. And here's the most important one. They are asking the Iranian, you must stop the support of the terrorist groups. Never mind how the region feels that. So those are an item idea. So from the start, this was not going to go anywhere else. It also reflects the position of the French and the Germans, who just after the first attack by the Israelis against Iran, they came in favor of this support. This is Macron, who before that he said, Israel, you must stop this war in Gaza, or we're going to recognize the Palestinian states. No, Macron came and his German counterpart made a statement that telling the world that Israel is doing the dirty work of the Western world, meaning that we are going to support you 100%. Macron was a little bit diplomatic, but saying, Israel, when you had those people, make sure to take into account civilians, don't target civilians. That's the only difference. Now, what happened to this one? Some very, very things, some important things that one could look at it is that the same leaders, France and the countries, agreed that the continuing with using military force will not stop Iranians from Iranian from building the nuclear weapons, meaning that the force will not be used. So you need to negotiate. I think there are a couple others, but I'll stop there. But that's the most important thing. Now, where do we go from here? To connect to your question, this is perhaps in the absence, the same time the Security Council met and there were a discussion about it, and you heard the Algerian rightly describing how to perceive this. So in the absence of a United Nations Security Council resolution that would allow United States to intervene, I think what Trump is doing is using these platforms to give legitimacy to their action by saying, look, we tried all the ways, all means necessary to stop this. When you read the Reuters, the press releases, there is always an emphasis on Iranian failing to achieve its responsibilities. You don't see ideas where Israel must stop its aggression, that this is a violation of international law. You don't see that. Rather, you see built into the justification of why this is against that the United States in the end has a right to act. In fact, when in one of the press conferences or on the interviews that Trump did, he said that now this is different from what happened in Iran. In Iraq, the point is that, remember when we went to Iraq, invaded Iraq under the pretext that they have weapons of mass destruction. We remember Colin Powell in the United Nations Security Council to say, I have the proof they have all these nuclear weapons. Well, it turns out that was not the case, and Colin Powell comes back and sort of felt sorry for himself making that statement. Well, Trump was asked the same question, and he said, and he replied, "Well, this is different now. We have good intelligence." The reporter replied, said, follow up. Just this last point, Islam. A reporter replied that the intelligence is saying now that Iran doesn't have it. Well, he said, well, the intelligence is wrong. So what we're looking at is that this is a way for Trump to use to move on his next phase.
Mr. Hamoud Salehi, as we speak, there is a breaking news. Iran has just launched another wave of missiles towards the occupied Palestinian territories. And these images are live right now as we speak. Sirens are blaring on the area of Tel Aviv in the occupied Palestinian territories, with continuous attempts to intercept these drones and these missiles by the Zionist occupation forces. And these live images from the occupied Palestinian territories, as we can see, live images as Iran launches a new wave of missiles, barrage of missiles against the Zionist occupation in the eighth night of this conflict. Explosions are heard in some parts of the occupied Palestinian territories, with attempts by the Zionist occupation forces to intercept these missiles. As I said, sirens are blaring across multiple sites on the occupied Palestinian territories, including including Tel Aviv and other parts on the territories. After Iran, I reiterate, Iran launched a new wave of missiles towards the Zionist occupation on the 8th night of the conflict. This is to be considered the 19th wave of missiles. As we can see, these are the live images. Mr. Hamoud Salehi, what's your reading on this? I mean, Iran is trying to intensify, or it is intensifying. Hamoud Salehi, Mr. Hamoud Salehi, Iran is intensifying its airstrikes. I mean, what's your reading on this?
So we are. Iran, perhaps this is a statement to the reaction that they've seen from the European in Geneva, but also from Trump. But there is also some new things that are developing, and I'm not sure which missiles are using. But the Iranian were today promoting a new missile, a missile that will take minutes, what you call it, I believe, Shahid or Miftah missile. And this is like a new technology. It's very, very efficient and very strong.
Do you think that Iran is using the element of surprise here to showcase its latest
weapons, the new technology that they are bringing to the table? Yes, and we constantly being surprised by the technology they're using. Remember when this started? They started with the old missile, with the old sort of drones that they have or whatever from the old Russian system, and perhaps it was designed, but they said like hundreds of them at one time or another. Now the number is smaller. We're talking about sometimes they are 20, 10, 30, because they are developing their technology, they are testing, and they are trying to use also the element of surprise. And one of them, one of the realization, and you shown this Islam earlier, where they also lead in this war, the psychological war. You really don't need to send 30 or 40 to create panic among the population, to project the idea that you're a threat. So they also play on the psychological war. That's a huge effect that they are using as well.
Mr. Shapiro, Hebrew media just reported that explosions were heard in several areas, including Tel Aviv. I mean, how much do you think the Zionist interceptors bear? I mean, this huge number of missiles. I mean, successive waves of missiles in the 8th night of the conflict.
I mean, we know that the United States is continually resupplying and also supporting with its own weaponry the Iron Dome and the other systems that are being used as a shield. But we are seeing over the last few days more and more Iranian ballistic missiles getting through and striking targets. My understanding is that this is in fact actually part of the Iranian strategy. We're not seeing as many missiles being fired, but what is happening is that they're drawing a lot more of the interceptors and depleting some of those stocks. And I think that's something that is of concern for the Netanyahu government at this point, and something that is, I think, in part giving pause to the United States in terms of getting more involved, at least, this kind of alleged 2-week pause in terms of decision making. I think the Iranians have started to figure out how to attack more effectively. We saw in the first days many more missiles being fired and not as many getting through, and in the more recent days, fewer missiles being fired but more getting through and causing more damage. If I was the Israeli government, I would certainly be concerned about that, and I think that's why you're starting to see a different kind of messaging coming out from the Israeli military, warning its citizens it needs to be prepared for a longer battle. We don't see the same, in the first days of the propaganda, it sounded as if there would be no more Iran within a matter of minutes, and now they're talking about a larger conflict.
Mr. Shapiro, the two places hit are occupied Al-Quds and Tel Aviv. I mean, does this have signification here? Or significance?
I think the strikes, the strikes in Tel Aviv obviously hit the heart of the population center and the commercial center. I think the strikes earlier at Haifa actually pose a more significant problem for Israel, in that Haifa is, of course, where oil and gas is stored and produced. It's a major seaport. That's not normally been a target in the past, but I think is quite significant and raises up the stakes quite a bit. In terms, it would be interesting to hear where exactly the strikes were in Al-Quds. Of course, the seat of the Israeli parliament is there, but I think the strikes also in the south. We shouldn't overlook the fact that Iran is saying that it is targeting military facilities and intelligence facilities, which are located in the south. Of course, Israel's nuclear reactor in Dimona is in the south, and that, as far as we know, hasn't been attacked yet. But given the attacks on Iranian nuclear facilities, you would think that there could be a tit-for-tat kind of response. I think this is escalating, and Iran is proving far more effective in using its technology than Israel was accounting for.
Mr. Sassi, let me include you in this debate. I mean, according to Hebrew media, this wave of Iranian strikes, this wave specifically was, directly targeting the Tel Aviv. Where does this lead us exactly? Are we seeing the collapse of the crafted image of the Zionist occupation invincibility?
Well, this was already done since October 7, 2023. That's one thing. And the other thing I would like to come back, this exchange of missiles is something we are in war, and like every war, you retaliate, and the aggressor is Israel, and the one who's defending is Iran. But I would like to go back to Genève point. The Genève point, you have, number one, they are not negotiations, they are talks. And you have Germany. Germany, you have the representative of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, who said specifically, and here I'm quoting, of course, I think a negotiating solution is in the long term the best solution. But she added also that Iran should not have a nuclear weapon without any question. And the German are in the task. I don't think they can be believed. And then you have the French. And the last declaration of Mr. Macron. When he was in the G7, he said to Mr. Trump, no, we cannot do that. We should not do the ultimatum, ask for capitulation, etc., etc. And now what he's saying, he's saying, yes, he said that he's with the United States stance, meaning that Iran should be remaining free from uranium enrichment, meaning l'enrichissement du uranium 3.6. This insistence of France and the change of semantic.
Mr. Sassi.
Now let me finish the point. How come Iran can sit down and continue the talks when you have on one hand Germany, who said no, in any case you cannot have any kind of uranium program, France that come now and go to the state and think the same, and they would like him to sit down and accept the unacceptable when they were aggressed by Israel. And don't forget Israel regarding all the report of the agents, the IAEA. All the report. Last week they said Iran doesn't have any program.
Mr. Sassi, as we can take a look at these live images right now. Mr. Sassi, let me ask you this question. It's a follow-up question to what...
We have to stop to put our head in the sand and looking at the things as they are. Please.
Mr. Sassi, long story short, according to these live images that we can see right now here, the conflict is growing. If these talks fail, the United States and Iran, including the Zionist entity as well, what are the next diplomatic moves that we can anticipate, or does the region head toward direct confrontation?
Well, I think we are already in direct confrontation because physically is only Israel.
I'm talking here about the United States and I'm talking here about the United States and Iran.
France is saying that you cannot have it. Of course, and they are giving them the armor. Is already original. And the hypocrisy in face of this. When you go to Ukraine, they claim, oh, look what Putin is doing and we are going to stop that. What kind of rhetoric is this? I'm sick and tired of all this media, all this nonsense, all this hiding truth. When the aggressor still Israel, he never attacked whatsoever Iran, but Israel from 1996 want to destroy Iran, want to claim that they have a nuclear program, which is not true. The IAEA said not less than 3 days ago and yesterday during their speeches, they say we didn't find anything. And now Iran is asking for sanctions because when you are part of the I'm sorry. You have a clause that says you cannot attack. You cannot attack the nuclear site. They are doing it, and nobody is erasing it. That's sickness.
That wraps up, Mr. Sassi, that wraps up our show for tonight. As missiles fall and firewalls break, the region hangs between escalation and diplomacy with every strike. The stakes grow higher, but so do the calls for restraint. Behind closed doors, the push for de-escalation gains quiet momentum as the world watches the showdown unfold. Will diplomacy break through before the next missile does? Big thank you to our wonderful guests, Mr. Hamoud Salhi, Mr. Mohammed Chris Sassi, and Mr. Adam Shapiro. To all of you at home for spending this time with us, have a peaceful night and take care.